Hey, the three body problem, people. It's a bit of an enigma. Some people just can't get into this book. I found it freaking amazing. Today I've got a guest with me to dig into this book a bit. Full spoiler episode ahead. So let me bring our guest in here today. Now, before you, we've got Amber from Road to Tarvalon.
Hello,
Welcome, welcome,
hello.
welcome.
Thank you so
How are you
much for
doing
having
today?
me. I'm doing great. I'm really excited to talk about this book. I love it, so I'm ready.
Wonderful. So everybody can know this is a love fest, people. We both loved this book. If you didn't, we're going to try to change your mind. We'll give you some thoughts. But again, as I said, this is full spoiler. So if you haven't read it, what are you doing here? Go away. Shoo, go read it and come back. We'll still be here. But Amber, before we talk about the book, we're together here on this now because I was, sharing, I was enjoying the book and all, and you commented, you jumped on in there, and following along with my thoughts and shared how much you also enjoyed the book and maybe we should talk about it. So I said, yes, let's do it in front of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're one of these other content creators out there, and some of our people maybe have never heard of you or your stuff before. So take a moment. Tell us about you and your content and where they can find you.
Yeah, so Road to Valon YouTube channel. I mainly cover fantasy, sci-fi, a lot of Wheel of Time stuff. But now, as things are kind of ramping up with Netflix's Three Body Problem, this is something that I've been really excited to cover and talk about. So you'll probably be seeing more of that on my channel as well.
Awesome. So just Road to Darvalin, that's what they find. That's what they look up
Yep,
on
that's
YouTube. That
it.
there you are.
Yes.
Awesome. Zach and I, we of course are covering the same kind of content stuff you just mentioned, but we go back and forth on how to pronounce that. I'm a Tarvalon guy. He's a
It's
Tarvalon.
I am one of those people where the pronunciation, especially with Wheel of Time stuff, I don't mind. Like I don't correct people. Like I'm just like, you know what? However it feels natural to you, go
That's right.
for it.
We all know what we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, that's a good attitude to take when we talk about the three body problem, since
Oh yeah.
most of the names are Chinese.
I'm sure I'm
Even,
going to stumble a few times, so forgive me
I
in
mean,
advance.
and I don't know that we'll dwell a lot on names because they're hard. They're really hard, unless you're Chinese. And then you're like,
Yeah.
really? Really?
Yeah.
And how do you say Jim? Yim? What is that name? It's all cultural context.
Yes. Yes.
And that's probably why some people struggle with this book, cultural context. We'll get to more of that here, but I want to
Yeah.
ask you a question first.
Yes.
When did you first discover and read this book? Because it's much newer, I think, for me than you. I'd heard about it some months ago. It was on my TBR, and then I saw Netflix was doing a show, so I moved it up and read it. But
Yeah.
what about you?
So I can't exactly pinpoint, but I know it's been at least 2 years since I read it the first time. Last winter, I went back and reread Three Body Problem, the first of this series, and I just finished a reread of the last book a week ago. So
And when you say the last book, is that the fourth book? Because some people talk about a trilogy, but I've seen there's a fourth one.
there's, well, so there's the main trilogy, and then I believe there's like an endorsed fan fiction endorsed by the author that people say is like the fourth book. So
Ah,
I don't know if I'll ever
so
get to that one,
so you're
but
talking about the trilogy.
I'm
Okay,
talking about the trilogy. Yes.
perfect. I have not read as much as you have, so this is full spoil on book one. We're
Just
not
book
gonna
one.
ruin the other stuff. I'm
Nope.
halfway through the second book, and it's even better. I mean, I'm totally loving it. At least I think it's even better.
Yeah.
Um, Do you agree? Did you enjoy the trilogy more as you moved through it further?
Yeah, every book I liked more than
Okay.
the last. So,
Okay. Well, what are some of the elements of this story that you particularly enjoy or value?
so for this book, essentially what I think is a really interesting concept, and I know it's not a new science fiction concept, but I really like how the Trisolarans are kind of like an allegory for it's almost like humanity holding a mirror up to themselves. Anything that you value or you see as a human, like you're kind of looking at this other being, these other species and saying, okay, they could be our saviors, they could be the destroyers, they could be a god. Like so many people throughout this first book have a different type of relationship with these entities that are coming, where it's like, do we worship them? Are we afraid of them? Are we going to go to war with them? And so often, that's what the alien species is in science fiction. But
Hmm.
with this story, what I think was really interesting and kind of put things in a new perspective for me, where I was like, oh, okay. So often, and I think this is just, a human thing in general, but we really romanticize space. And as a sci-fi lover, like guilty, I love I love science fiction. I love space stuff in general, and it's so easy to
Sure.
be look at like people in our society like Elon Musk, like we're going to live on Mars. We're going to see what's out there. Is there life out there? We're going to send Beethoven into space. We're going to look. And with this series, as I'm going through it, I'm like, oh, no, 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 do not send Beethoven into space. Turn off the lights, don't answer, no one's home. That's how we're dealing with this. And it kind of put me in this like really introspective place where so often I'm like, oh, like look to the stars. And now I'm like, no, 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 no. Don't do that.
You, I've seen sci-fi content out there though that does tend to go both ways. That
Yeah,
either aliens, extraterrestrials, being so advanced that they might be able to come to us to contact us, must be, superior beings with higher morals and all. But
right.
then there's also the Independence Day crowd. If they come
Yeah,
here, it's because they're going to devour and conquer. It does play both ways. So this
yes,
is giving us, I like how you said it, kind of a human perspective on it. What we see in the Solarians is kind of like ourselves in that, I mean, their highest moral value is to survive. They're
right.
going to do what they got to do to survive. What I found one of the most wow moments of this book, or elements for this book, is to see a character, an initial character, so disappointed and frustrated with humanity that she'd rather see aliens come and just have the planet, take it over, do what you want, because we're not worth it the way we are
Right.
to carry on. It can't
Yeah.
get worse. Like,
Yeah.
what a damning statement about humanity.
Yeah. Look, so this character, Sia, maybe I think how you pronounce it, possibly.
Good try. I have
I
no idea.
I
And I listened
really
to this on Audible, so I heard how they said it, and I can't keep the names in my
it is what it is. But I
head.
I love this character for the fact that she's a very sympathetic villain, essentially. Like she is damning all of existence with just one push of a button, but
Yep.
everything that she's gone through, everything that you've seen from her point of view, you absolutely 100% understand why she's making the decisions that she is making. And I feel bad for her. I don't think she did the right thing, but I understand why she did it. And it's just like you said, like what a gut punch. Like just
Yeah.
she
And
she
one
needed
single decision
yeah, we
changes the entire course of human history.
yeah, Earth
Whoa.
needed new management. I'm pushing the button. That's it, hands down.
And to add that extra layer, that who does she first hear from the Trisolarans? someone who takes the more courageous, one might say, perspective of
Yes.
don't reply and keeps giving
Yes.
more information and don't reply for the
Right.
sake of all that's holy. Don't reply, basically.
Yeah.
So she replies
Yeah.
anyways. I was like, wow.
It's rough. It's rough. And then, I mean, her whole arc is just what a roller coaster. I mean, there's so many moments in different chapters where you think things could maybe get a little bit better and it just keeps like snowballing into this like, oh no, not again. Oh,
Yeah,
poor
yeah.
woman, this poor woman. But
There's a lot of darkness to this story. Um,
absolutely.
Dystopian without being fully dystopian yet, because it's
Yeah.
really just a regular, normal modern context. Uh, but yeah, dark. And I think that's one of the things that maybe turns people off of this book initially, because it starts out just giving us that historical background of the Chinese Cultural Revolution and the horrible things that were being done by people who were just on a cause, man, and we're going to
Yeah.
get rid of anyone and anything that doesn't fit align with what we believe the perfect China should be.
Yes.
And I mean, even the Chinese now would acknowledge this was not a good time for them. This
Right.
was a blemish on their culture, on their
Right.
society. But it starts out so into that, and we understand we need that background to see what drives her to make the
Right.
choice she does. But it's like a good 15% of the book that's stuck in
Mhm.
all of that. And
Yeah.
I can see people going, I'm not, no, putting the book down.
Yeah, I know people who have picked it up and think like I was promised aliens. Where are the aliens? This is, like why are we in the 60s going through this woman's life? And I'm like, no, 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 it's really important. Trust me.
It
Trust.
truly is.
Trust.
An author who took the time to really build in realistic motivation for characters to act
Yeah.
the way they do. You got to get into their life a little to see what would do this. Otherwise, it's not going to feel real.
And I think it's really interesting too because I feel this same way where like you really get these motivations, but a lot of people I have heard say, it's just not character driven enough for me. And I'm like, oh, that's unfortunate.
Did you
But
read the same book we read? Yeah.
right. But I think like too when you're bouncing back to characters like Wang Miao or De Shi, like they're more plot driven than character driven, but Yawensia is much more character driven. So like
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's a kind of a mixture
Maybe
of the
that's it.
two, but
Yeah.
I could understand where people see it that way, but I still believe that it's pretty adequately character driven enough, at least for
I think
me.
so. And then we add in this element of a video game, an immersive. I mean, I got an Oculus Rift at home here, so I'm. You're into this whole world experience. I can picture what they're talking about here, and
Mhm.
at first you're like, "What is this? This is interesting." Okay, but when you come to realize what's going on here and what this is being used for, it's just fascinating and a great plot development, the way the author came up with this.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, between the Trisolarans and then is it ETO, the
The
human
ETO.
tri
Yep.
okay, okay. Between these 2 factions, they've developed this game, and it's essentially just it's 2 things. It's propaganda to say, like, "Look, that they have it so bad. They need our help. Like, take pity on these people. They're great. They're trying their best. Look what they're doing." And then on the other hand, they're using the game as a way to almost recruit the most intelligent minds on earth. So it's
Totally.
just like double
Yes.
whammy, like 2 birds, 1 stone. I love the game. The I love what it does for the story. The reading segments of these chapters for me was maybe a little bit slower, I think. I actually liked
Mhm.
going back to the 60s and getting to know like where her story ended, but I still really appreciated the gameplay aspect. I think it's fun.
The initial time that the one man is in the game. Which name was him?
Wang Miao, Wang Miao, maybe.
Yes, he's the one that we primarily are
Yeah,
experiencing the game through. That first time where he's there and he's walking along with the one king of some
yeah,
sort,
emperor
and
and
his
follower.
right, and his companion follower, and they get to the point where, this is just getting too hard. I think you're gonna need to dehydrate. What? It totally turns into a piece of
Like,
vellum that can be rolled up and now carried like a
yes,
parchment, a scroll.
yes.
I was like, what? That was
It
bizarre but fascinating.
it really is like it almost hits this level of camp that I was not expecting, where it gets like wacky, but in a way
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
not. I mean, it's not like childish. It's still like really interesting and weird and fun.
And then throughout these various, levels of the game and iterations of society that come and are destroyed, and then come again and are destroyed and then come again, that figuring out how to, know what's going on with these three sons, that was fascinating too. It was a puzzle. It's a little bit of a mystery, and seeing
Yeah,
it finally get resolved, and that the ultimate iteration of resolving it is
there is no
there's no way
resolution.
to
Yeah.
escape. We
Yeah.
can't do anything other than know now that eventually we're just dead. We're all dead. There will be no more Trisolaran society.
Yes. That Yeah, that chapter where it's really the climax, I think, for of the gameplay segment. I think, well, part of it maybe the Great Rift, where the suns are too close. They've lined up now, so the gravity is so strong that their planet is just like pulled like into space, and you've got all the soldiers and they're flying around and screaming, and I'm like, this is epic in a way that I didn't see coming. Like, I didn't expect something like this
Right.
happening. Then you have like the unfolding of the Sophon, and you're just like, what? It's still going. Like,
Wow.
it's still
Yes.
happening.
And some of these things, I mean, I'm not a scientist. I've
No,
read a lot
me
of science
either.
fiction, uh, but I think some of these things are really tied to real science. Some of this can, it does fit with some scientific theory that's out there, like quantum entanglements and the ability of what the Sophons, will mean, could do. Yeah, I think that's actually rooted
Yeah.
in some physics, some actual things we do know about science, which is always fascinating when you can take real science, use it in perhaps a new novel way, and still make a really interesting story, not
It
start boring people.
Well, it definitely goes that way, and I think, I mean, I love, like, some hard sci-fi. I know The Expanse is, like, kind of hard sci-fi. I love The Expanse, but
Absolutely.
with this series, I felt like, "Oh, wow, like, you really don't know a lot of what's going on here." I'm not a scientist, but as the way that the series progresses, every time that I felt really stupid, it looped back around and I got more information that I was like, "Okay, that clicks now. This is starting to make sense to me." So, at some segments, I just thought, like, I'm way, like, way over my head here. But the way that the author writes things every
Brings us
time,
along.
yeah, it was really nice. I mean, I did feel a little bit discouraged where I thought, did I miss something or did I just not understand it? And then, like, a couple chapters later, I would get more pieces of the puzzle and it would start
Hmm.
to become clearer. And I love when a story or when an author can do that. It's so nice because you feel like you're learning as you're going, but it doesn't feel like homework.
You finish a book and you feel smarter. Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Right, it's
And
wonderful.
and when an author, I mean, this is a risk an author like this takes because we're going into science, and
Absolutely.
he's choosing not to treat us like we're stupid. He's giving us enough, but not holding our hand, not giving us
Right.
everything, trusting we'll keep trusting him and coming along, knowing we might be a little hazy at times, but it'll become clearer.
Yes.
And
It's
yeah,
so
it does. It
important
works.
not to spoon feed the audience to the point
Yes.
where, like, the pattern recognition kicks in, you're like, "Okay, I know what's gonna happen." Like, this series is not like that. Anytime I thought, like, I had a guess where I think somewhere, like, it's gonna go this way, no. It's usually, like, right before something happens and you get that little piece of information, and it's like, "Are they gonna they're going there, aren't they? Oh, wow, they went there.
Hmm. Yeah.
They did
Yeah.
it."
There's a lot of fascinating, enjoyable aspects of this story, and many of the characters just bring so much to it. But I think the one that I just kind of smiled every time this character came back
Yes.
into the screen was the police detective.
Yes. Yes.
He just, I could picture him. I could see this. This is a character, uh, uh, an archetype of a certain character we do see in other stories, but it's just portrayed so well.
He's great. He's so, like, he's gruff, he drinks, he smokes, like, he's rough around the edges, but I love this
But he's good.
concept of having the detective Desha is amongst all of these scientists, and he is not the most book smart guy in the room. He is
He's like, this is
sitting at
mostly,
right.
yeah,
Sitting at a table with geniuses, but he has something different. He has, like, the
yes.
background and just the natural intuition to put puzzle pieces together. And I
Hmm.
love this grouping of characters because we also have, the all the scientists, they're so fatalistic, like, oh, like, you don't understand, like, science, physics, everything we know, it's wrong, nothing makes sense, laws mean nothing anymore, and they're, just losing it. And he's like, hold
Yeah,
it together, like, if
right.
I look up to the sky too long, the suspect gets away, like, come back down to earth a little bit. And I love a grounding character like that. I
There
love
were
the logic.
multiple moments where he just shut down a room
Yes.
by, he's just gonna say something, and at first they don't want to listen, and you don't know what you're talking about, and then he'd have his say, and everybody's like, oh,
That's a yes.
wow, yeah, okay. And that's what
Yes.
he brought to the table. That different way of thinking.
There's a moment when they're in the, like, the quote unquote war room, I guess, and they're making plans with the ship Judgment Day. And they're trying to wrap
Mm,
their heads around what type of plan they're going to go with. And then it all comes full circle. We learn, Wang Miao is working on his flying blade nano
nanotechnology,
technology.
yeah.
So they're gonna slice this ship
It's
into
like,
layers.
whoa.
Yeah, and he says, the police detective Disha says something along the lines of, "We have to do it in the daytime." And they're like, "Why is that?" And he's like, "Because if we do it at night, everybody will be laying everyone will be laying down. We
Right?
have people, like, standing upwards, so everyone gets chopped." And I'm
It's
like, "Oh."
so dark. So I'm also a bit of a horror movie aficionado. And back in the day, I saw, I think, the movie Ghost Ship. And there's
Yes,
an
I know it.
opening scene. You've seen
Yes,
that? And
I
I'm
know
like, I'm
exactly what
picturing
you're
that, but
talking about.
multiplied throughout the ship. I'm like, oh,
Yes. I also think
that's
of Resident Evil, like the laser beam thing
yes.
that goes through
And
the
then the time
room.
that it goes,
Yes.
oh.
Yes.
But then again, true to science,
True
when
to science.
they enact the plan and Judgment Day goes through the trap and everything seems fine until it's not.
Right.
Pieces start falling off, and it's like,
Mhm.
oh my goodness, the detail was a little graphic, but
Y
just as it was supposed to be. I mean,
yeah.
that's how it would have happened. Oh,
I I see I see the reason why this series was chosen for an adaptation, because it does have these big moments where you're just kind of like jaw drop. We're like, wow, okay, that went there. And I know
yeah.
I hate bringing this up because so often it's like, what's going to be the next Game of Thrones? What's going to hold the cultural zeitgeist, like, captive in that type of way? So
Hmm.
I think with this series, there is a lot of potential for really shocking moments that some people won't expect. And I think too, it's so different than a lot of science fiction. So I think like, I don't know, it's a fun
Yeah.
choice.
I think it will have the benefit also that uh, not as many people will have read it or even have realized it's a book
Right?
because it's science fiction and it's written in China. So you're
Yeah,
reading translation. Some people don't even look at things that have been translated. So
right.
that's maybe an advantage. They won't have as many people mad at the adaptation choices, but we'll get to that right at the end. I'm going
Yeah,
to talk on a couple last things here
let's
before we jump to
rewind.
that. And one, we talked a lot about what we appreciate, really
Mm.
value in the book, but were there any aspects of it that you didn't care for as much? I mean, maybe not, but any least favorite parts you'd mention?
I'm really trying to think. So, I mean, the only thing that really kind of just was like not like a love for me, these maybe not so major characters like Shen Yufei and inside the ETO. Mike Evans was pretty good. They kind of were like these cloak and dagger figures where you get like a
Hmm.
little bit of what their philosophy is, but they didn't feel as fully fleshed out as some of the others. But with that said, I don't think that it was necessary to do that to get the plot of the book moving and,
Right.
to an ending. I think it would have maybe made things a little bit more fun if you got to understand like their motivations a bit more because we do get the two sides of the ETO. I think it's the Adventists and the forget the other side.
Oh
It's
man, I
been
was
a
hoping you'd
while.
remember. The Adventists and the it start with a T. Um, yeah, I'm blocking.
It
Let me
doesn't
see. I got
matter.
some
There's
notes in front of me.
there's well, there's two sides, right? And so it's interesting too for me that within this organization, you've got a schism where one side believes one thing and one side believes the other. They're essentially want the same thing, but they're going to go about it in different ways. I liked this
Yep.
infighting within an organization. I found that really,
Human.
yeah, it
Very
makes
human.
total sense to me. I liked that, and I really loved that inclusion of Mike Evans, where it's like you've got this character, right? And he's in the beginning like pretty sympathetic, like he's out there, he's working for the environment, he wants to make life better for all species, his pan species communism he calls it. And
Right.
it's really interesting to have something or have someone who is typically like in I guess like our society you would see someone like that and you're like, oh, they're a fighter, they're doing good for humanity. And you can see how this concept, even when it could be like the right thing to do, it's still the absolute wrong thing to do. Like the best intentions, looking out for other species, right? But at the same time, like it comes back to that romanticizing space. Like instead of thinking about what could happen, it's like, no, like you see these aliens and you kind of attribute this very humanic trait to it. It's like, well, it's like you go to a shelter and you see a puppy that needs a home and you're like, we gotta take this puppy home, right? And he's looking out to space and saying, like, these they deserve rights. They should have an okay life too, don't you think? And it's like, oh, like so many layers of philosophical
Right.
ideas. It's I could go
Yeah.
on and on.
The only aspect for me, because I loved the book and it captivated me, but the aspect that I could see as my least favorite, though I totally
Mhm.
understand why it's there, we've already referenced. It's just the beginning, the way it starts, where there's nothing science fiction going on. It's all
Ah,
back in cultural Chinese history.
okay.
Not ancient history. It's still
Mhm.
recent times, but if you're looking for a good sci-fi book, you're like, what is this? This isn't what I came for. And
Yeah,
because it goes on for such a chunk of time, it could really turn a person off. I just kept going. I'm like, no, I've heard enough about this book. I know this is going
right.
somewhere.
That's a
But,
really great point. That's a really great
yeah.
point.
And for
Of
people who read a lot of science fiction, that could be one of the reasons they might not enjoy this book as much, because it's not just we're out in the galactic
Mhm.
empire and humans are spanning the, galaxy. No,
Right.
we're grounded on Earth with Earth
Yeah.
problems.
Yes.
And then it's the springboard into why this becomes a science fiction novel.
If I remember correctly, so in the English translation, it starts off with Yao Wenxia and her time in the 60s during the Cultural Revolution. But if I recall, I think the original book in its, mother tongue starts out with Wang Miao and the countdown. So the English
Oh,
translation
really? They
is
reversed it.
it's kind of chopped and put in different places a little bit. I'm not entirely sure why that happened, but
Mm,
so
okay.
if you had read it if you spoke Chinese,
Which I do not,
yeah,
Mandarin or Cantonese. I got nothing.
yeah, but it's interesting.
We hadn't even talked about the countdown, which was
Oh yeah,
fascinating.
yeah,
You know, Someone feels like they're going insane because there's numbers. And
right,
that was a cool
right.
device the author came up with.
Okay, since we're talking about small nitpicks, I just thought of one. Since you
Okay.
brought up the countdown. So this is very like surface level, but if the Trisolarans had the ability to give a countdown, they probably were capable of just blinding people, and they could have done that and then just shown up and had no one to fight because no one could see. But then the story would be very boring.
Right. If we think of all the solutions, we got
Yeah.
nothing to write about. Yes, but you're probably right.
Minor nitpick.
Now, the end of the book gives us a different perspective. We actually get to see and hear the Trisolarans as they're talking and planning for what they're going to do. Did you appreciate that part of the story? Because there's a part of me that almost feels like it would have been better if we hadn't gotten that, if they were left more mysterious and we only know what we know of them through the ETO, through what has been understood and interpreted and
Right.
messages received. What do you think?
I don't know. I see the value in it because, like I said, there are some people where it's like, I was promised science fiction. I want to know about the aliens. So, like, on one hand, I totally can see why you would include something like that. But also at the same time, I think what you're saying is totally valid. I mean, think if they would have left that to like the beginning of the next book or something. But also, maybe it's a good hook. Maybe it's kind of that like to be continued that works in a way like a cliffhanger. I don't know.
It could be. It does reinforce that everything we think is going on with this alien people out there, it's real. It's not a misunderstanding. It's not a misinterpretation.
That's
They're
true.
coming.
Yeah,
They are
that's
coming.
true.
So there's that.
Yeah.
Before we talk, then, kind of wrapping up by talking about the adaptation, is there anything else related to this book we should talk about? I think we've been pretty thorough, but is there something you were hoping we'd chat on?
Yeah. There's just one thing that I want to touch on because I know we've talked a lot about like the doom and gloom of the series where it can get kind of depressing or almost feel a bit more like the horror genre. But within this story, there are moments of like very strong, emotional, like beautiful moments, not because they're uplifting in the traditional sense of like good things happening, but like moments of like kindness and beauty. I think the way that it's written, for one, is just there are some things that if it were written originally in English, I don't think it would have come across as so I don't know, like there's just the way that some things are described, it's really different and it's really cool. But you also have moments like the universe flickered, where he's looking out at the cosmic microwave
Hmm.
radiation background. I forget what it's called,
Again, part
but
of how we got smarter reading the
yeah,
book.
yeah,
Yes.
yes. But like you have this picture of this man who's looking out into space and the universe winks at him. And like I get chills when I think about this moment because it's really just it's beautiful, but it's terrifying. Um, there's also a moment where Yawansia, I don't remember what had happened. It might have been with the birth of her daughter, but at some point while she's on Red Coast base, she starts tutoring all of these young children in the village
Yes.
physics. And she becomes like this beloved figure in the community. And she ends up in the hospital and it looks really, really bad for her. And the whole village like shows up trying to help her. And they bring
Right.
her back to the village and they're like nursing her baby and like getting her back on her feet. So even within all this doom and gloom, there's still moments of like the humanity looking out for one another. And it's really beautiful to see those moments, but also just as devastating when they're ripped away.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I did appreciate that the author's culture, his background, China being so integral to this story, does impact the plot, the way the story is told, the different nuanced understandings of humanity, ways of looking at the world. And that for me was a very fresh type of science fiction. So
Yeah,
some people might find that, and I can't connect with the story. And I'm like, no, you need to broaden your mind a little because that
right.
was something new. And I like new, and it worked.
Same, same. I don't think I've ever put a book down because it was like, oh, like, well, a male protagonist, I just can't relate, you know? Like if it's another culture, it's the same thing. Like I want to relate. I want to know.
I'm glad you can do that because we are getting more female protagonists, but there's an awful lot you'd never read if you felt that way.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about Netflix. We have
Yeah.
hopes. There are more, I believe, more bad failed adaptations than good adaptations out there for science fiction and fantasy. Now,
Yeah.
it's getting better. There have been some big wins in the last decade or so now, but still it's a contentious thing. I mean, we're both Wheel of Time fans, and
Yeah.
wow, can the fandom go around and around and around on the adaptation of the Wheel of Time?
Absolutely.
How's Netflix gonna do with the three body problem? What do you think? Are they gonna botch it? Are they gonna pull it off brilliantly or fall somewhere in between?
Well, first off, I don't know if there's enough that we've seen yet, just the trailer and the few sneak peeks that we've had to
Yeah.
really like really get a good idea how it's going to go. But the thing that I've noticed is it looks like things are going to be a bit more chronological in the adaptation. So you're going to meet
Hmm.
characters much earlier in the show than you will in the books. And I definitely see the value in that as far as character building. If
Sure.
someone's, an end game character, you might as well put them out in the beginning and get to know and feel and understand them and get attached. So
Right.
I'm okay with that. That's not a problem for me. I'm very flexible as long as something makes sense. Like as long as it feels logical, I'm okay with it. But I'm really excited. I know I know some people did not love the last few seasons of Game of Thrones. I was one of those people,
It
but
stumbled to the finish line. Yes.
yes. But
Especially season 8.
it,
Yeah.
things happen, choices were made, but I hope that there's a little bit of redemption for the showrunners and they're excited to do something new because maybe that was the case with Game of Thrones. They were just over it and uninspired. And maybe this is
I've heard
enough to
people say
like
that.
get the mojo going, hopefully.
I mean, the show was still had a huge following. The ratings were spectacular.
Yeah.
HBO was not pressuring them to wrap it up. They were just done. They wanted to finish this thing, and it's like, oh, that's sad.
Yeah, I mean, it is, but I hope for the best. I don't have my expectations sky high. I gotta dial it back a little bit,
Mhm.
but everything that I've seen as far as like the visuals look amazing. It looks beautifully shot. The characters are going to be a lot different because we're not having a full Chinese cast. It is very international. So you have actors from India, Africa,
Sure.
Mexico, I think. It's a lot different. But again, I don't find that to be like a big, you know, problem for me. I'm pretty flexible. I'm just excited mainly.
I am hopeful. I'm looking forward to it for sure. It's one where I think my wife will enjoy watching it with me. She's
Ooh,
not read this.
okay.
This is outside of her genre profile, but I had her watch The Expanse with me. Have you watched the full adaptation of The Expanse?
I've read it all, I've seen it all. I love
Okay,
the
good, good.
I think it's like
And
the gold
it's
standard for
brilliant. I
adaptation.
love it. And I want them to do it along that style. You know, the Expanse adaptation changes things from the books, but it's very faithful to the plot, the themes, the core story that need to be told. But
Right.
for the sake of television, there were things that changed, and that makes sense. But there was nothing that had diehard Expanse readers throwing things at their TV screens. It wasn't like that. I mean, I can think of one change maybe that got some people hurt, but it's small potatoes. Okay, and they made a great story that came to the screen. I want to see that for the Three Body Problem too, and I think it will make good television.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I'm excited for like the reaction videos of people being like, "What is happening?" I want to see other people going through those moments that I went through and being able to like connect that way.
And if they do pull off some of these big moments that we know come in the book, and they put it on the screen in the shocking ways it could be there, people will be talking. It'll be a hit.
Yeah, I think so. I'm very interested. I haven't been excited about a TV show like this in a very long time. But I cherish this book series. It's probably one of my favorites, like hands down. Just it's
Nice.
great.
Well, I'm glad I got into it now. I'm totally enjoying it. I look forward to seeing how it finishes because, like I said, halfway through book two, I'm going to keep moving through right on to book three. And probably I'll have it all done before the TV show starts. So I know the end game and understand what they're going to be building.
Yeah.
But it's definitely one I'm enjoying. Yeah.
Yep. I've got a couple of people on my Discord channel right now who are finishing this series, and I'm like just sitting back and like so excited for
That's
them.
right.
It's
We're going to be able to
great.
talk soon. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Love it. Love it. All right. Well, that's good. A good wrap. A good
Yeah.
job of us covering this book. And we were fair. You know, we talked about a lot of things we enjoy, but it's not a perfect book. There is no perfect book, but it's pretty close. It's got a lot of good going for it. And we hope those of you who are watching, you've read it too. You probably are here because you loved it. We hope you agree with the things we said. But the things you think we got wrong, drop them in the comment box. You know, I always like to see those and I'll respond. And if you just want to say, that was awesome, thank you, we'll take that too. That's all
Yeah.
good. While you're thinking about commenting, don't forget to hit that like button down there. And if this is the first time you've been here and you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And if you really enjoyed hearing what Amber had to say, go check out her channel too. I'll put a
Yeah.
link directly to Road to Tarvalon. How did you say it?
I say Road to Tarvalon.
Okay, to Road to
Or
Tarvalon down there, and you
however
can
you want. However you want, Jim.
But go check out her channel. Amber, thank you for being here with me today. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having me. I love talking about this. I love being here. So thanks so much.
It's been a pleasure. And it's always good to talk about good books.
Sure
There it
is.
is. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll let you go. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time. And I just got to hit the right button.